Graham, for example, was clearly, the movements were, I don't want to use the wrong word here, but there was weight to her movement, which from the very beginning, even in the Cornish school, when I was simply working at those strange exercises, something about the weight of them. I couldn't think of any other word. Whereas if someone else took that movement without having seen her, would have perhaps made something which was far lighter. But I found that part of her work, when particularly watching her, frankly, remarkable. The way she would move an arm, and that beautiful solo frontier, where the leg comes up to the side that way, the weight with which it got there, got up high, but it wasn't just a high kick, it was this motion through space in a certain amount of time that had a kind of shape and weight to it. And that was, I think, very much part of her, well, all her work, probably.
I'm Eilber, and I'm delighted to have you all here for this installation of the Graham Studio series. We do these events every couple of months, and we hope you'll come back early and often. Tonight we're doing something a little different. This is our CunningGraham event. When the Graham Center was lucky enough to move into Westbeth in 2012, many people in the dance world were entertained at the irony of Martha's company taking over Merce Cunningham's space at these studios at Westbeth, where Merce had taught and rehearsed and created for about 40 years, beginning in 1970. The irony being, as many of you know, that 30 years before, when Merce was 20 years old, Martha hired him to dance with her and be one of the first men in her company to integrate her company of all women. And he created roles in some of the seminal works of the 40s, El Penitente, Appalachian Spring, Letter to the World, Every Soul's a Circus, Deaths and Entrances. So several months ago, Jennifer Goggans and Daniel Madoff from the Cunningham side of the family tree, who really think of this as their space, suggested that maybe we could have some fun with this cosmic realignment of Martha and Merce, and suggested that we talk about the similarities of the Graham and the Cunningham techniques, their classroom exercises. The general impression is that Merce rejected and revolted against his work with Martha, and these two artists perhaps encouraged that impression. Certainly their dances, the choreographies they put on stage, are wildly different in tone and style, as you'll see in the excerpts that we'll perform later in the evening. But there are many similarities in their approaches to training dancers, with some essential differences that eventually feed this split in the end results, what winds up on stage. So I'm shortly going to turn this over to Virginie, Mécène, who's from the Graham side of the aisle, Jennifer and Daniel, to take you on a tour. They've selected several exercises from the different techniques and arranged them with a little bit of adjustments to better highlight the comparison and allow you to see these techniques side by side. Our demonstrators tonight are members of Graham 2 and dancers from the Cunningham Trust workshop program. They're accompanied by Dor Halad at the piano, who I hope we'll be able to see the dancers. Then following the dancers, we hope you'll have some questions ready, and Jennifer and Virginie and Daniel and I will be happy to duke it out. So I'm going to let them take it from here. Here is Virginie, Jennifer, and Daniel.
Well, good evening, everybody. Martha Graham started her company in 1926 and began creating radical new dances in a style that had never been seen before. In order to better understand and teach this new way of moving, she took movements and phrases from her theater pieces into the classroom. These theatrical, dramatic movements that expressed real human emotions and concerns became the foundation of the Martha Graham technique. In her quest to express human emotions, she based her technique on the impetus of the breath, her famous contraction and release, as well as the use of the spiral or torque of the body, oppositional forces, falls and recovery, and extreme shift of weight. All of these allow the body to project expressions in a theatrical dimension. Now, let's see a short film, and let's hear Martha Graham talk about her technique herself. You'll see Merce Cunningham in this film, and we'll see him shortly. Let's see if you can spot him.
Movement never lies. You will always reveal what you feel in your heart by what you do in your movement. This was my first lesson as a dancer. You work, you do what you know, you experiment with movement until you find some little secret language which speaks for your body and for your heart. movement gives you back very often the meaning. You don't start, I will express anger or I will express grief. You move in such a way that it gives you back anger or grief, so that you have your roots very far in fundamentals.
She seemed to have all the connections that so-called normal people, us, or me, for instance, speaking for myself, don't really have. The connections between emotion and movement and memory and intuition, all direct. There's no shortcut. There was no pretense in a way.
Hi. Merce Cunningham spent 6 years dancing as a soloist for the Martha Graham Dance Company. And during that time, he began choreographing solos for himself. He began working with composer John Cage. In 1953, he started his own company, and it became apparent at that time that he needed to train dancers and develop a technique in order to perform his works. In Merce's words, you can read this, "I thought that the ballet technique for the legs was astonishing, and I thought many things in the modern dance were remarkable for the torso. And so I tried to find ways to combine those to make a body which was flexible and pliant and allow for as many movement possibilities as I could see." Cunningham's choreographic works were abstract, devoid of any obvious narrative, and his class terminology reflected this as well. We curve our backs and arch them, tilt them and twist them. We extend our legs and circle them. Even the terminology is very straightforward. To quote Merce, "I don't feel that movement has to express something, rather that it is expressive of and by itself."
So last year was Merce's centennial celebration, and for that I was commissioned to make a film, and we thought we would show that film because we find that the biggest connection that we see between Merce and Martha can be found in his own dancing. So have a look.
a Graham technique class begins with exercise for the back.
And a Cunningham class begins with exercises for the back.
These Graham exercises are used to train the spine to connect all the movement from the pelvis and back, including the arms and legs.
These Cunningham exercises are used to train the spine to move in isolation from the movements of the legs and pelvis, arms, etc.
This ability of the torso to drive all the movement is essential to the Graham training.
This ability to separate the torso from the legs is essential for Cunningham training.
Dancers, can you take your places? So now we're going to start looking at some of the differences in these techniques. As Janet mentioned, the exercises that we picked out look very similar, but we want you to really have a keen eye here.
So let's start with the bounces. Both classes start with bounces. The major difference here, as you're going to see, is that in Graham we do it on the floor, and in Cunningham we stay standing up. Would you please sit? 5 and 6, and ready to go. And so as you will see more and more as we show you more exercise, curving the spine is emphasized in both techniques. But in Graham, the breath is involving the whole spine at once.
And in Cunningham, we talk about the spine in 3 sections, so the upper, the middle, and the lower. The hardest thing about this is getting the tempo right for both techniques, so we might, just so you know. So go. 1, 2, 3, and go. 2, 3.
Thank you. Both techniques have an exercise called the deep stretches.
In Graham, the weight is held up through the center with the contraction.
Our weight is firmly planted in the legs and feet.
I'll give the tempo for this.
Yeah.
1 and 2 and.
So the next exercise that we chose is feet coming forward in Graham and through the feet in Cunningham. And you'll see they look very similar, they have a similar function. In Cunningham, we already start to add a layer of two different elements happening in the body at one time. So you'll see the feet are doing something staccato or sharp and quick, and the arms are doing something smooth and continuous.
And then of course in Graham, everything is connected from the center, moves at one in coordination, and all connected. 5 and 6, and you're ready to go.
Exercise for each group, we just call this arm overhead in Cunningham, and for Graham is the long leans. These exercises actually look quite different, but we wanted to show them because the quality of the movement is quite similar. So see if you can see some similarities. See if you can see an action that looks like a strike or a whip. Here we go. 5, 6, 7, 8.
So this one's my favorite. The exercise on 8 for Cunningham, or the turns around the back for Graham. We were thinking about these as sort of distant cousins, because you'll see the architecture, the movement of the arms in the back, there's some similarities.
Yes, and in Graham, as you will see as we progress in difficulty, that we are really now starting to use the extreme use of the spiral. There is a conflict energy of forces there, and we start to bring, that starts to bring emotion to the movement. So here's a turn around the back.
So, okay, I hope I don't get crucified for saying this, but the same thing that Virginie's talking about, the conflict within the body, it exists in the Cunningham exercise as well. We don't talk about it as emotion or anything, but some of us feel it that way. Just put it that way. Okay. Let's see. 7 and 8. And
Now we need the dancers to readjust themselves a little bit for the next.
So the next exercise, exercise on 6 for the Graham dancers and hinges for the Cunningham dancers. These exercises are very similar. The Graham dancers are on their knees. The Cunningham dancers, of course, are standing. So one thing we would like you to look for, after the dancers do the hinge, they also arch. It's done very differently. In Cunningham, the arch gets added on to this hinge. So from the hips down, the position never actually changes. But in Graham, there's a release that happens, a break in the hip, and then the back arches. See if you can look for that. Here we go. 5 and 6 and.
Beautiful. So the dancers are going to stand up, the Graham dancers, yeah. And now we'll do the pliés. So both techniques have pliés. And in Graham, now that we have weight bearings on the legs, we still use the torso, spirals, taking the spiral around and spiraling in different directions.
So at this point in the Cunningham class, we focus mostly on the simplicity of the leg work. So we're working the legs, but there are options to add torsos, and for the purpose, we've added some torsos here. So you see also the layering on top of the legs as well. Oh, okay, this is another tough one. 7, 2, 3, and 8, 2, 3. Oh.
Beautiful dancers. And now some more, a little bit more complicated combinations starting. One of them called the rond de jambe for you. And for us, we'll explore also the shift of the weight on the top of that. And really, in any case, when we start to move standing and across, we really emphasize everything from the torso.
And for us, again, as in the pliés, we are focusing simply on the leg work. Then you'll see at the end, the torso gets added on very gently, slowly, as we start to incorporate more layered movement into the class. Here we go. 7, 2, 3, 8, 2, go.
go to an adagio, for us, the contraction and release of the torso initiates still all the movement. And you see now how, for example, the contraction is going to bring the leg up. The whole torso will tilt a little bit more to the side before to pencher. And even though we focus pretty much on the torso, the standing leg is very important. It needs to be very strong and very solid.
So now that we've established, we've done a lot of work on the legs being very simple, and we sort of continue they get harder, the legs get higher, and we add on more torso movements. So I want to say that although the torso movements are thought of and given separately, so the leg goes here and you curve here, whatever, but it's the dancer's job to make it one function. So it turns out to be one thing, a unified movement. Oh God, all right. 9, 10, 11, and 12. And
a short combination with each group, and now you're going to start to see where the techniques are starting to depart, and there are more significant differences, I would say. With Cunningham, again, this idea of a layered complexity, here you'll also see it in the arms. In Merce's later work, he created an entire vocabulary just for the arms. So this constant level of new innovation and complication, even in a single position, is quite evident. Also, just a reminder that there's no overt drama or narrative, although the physical demands of the exercise create a tension and a drive all on their own. Merce was interested in seeing the struggle to achieve these complex combinations and continually pushed his dancers to do more difficult tasks. So, here we go. I'll try not to give it too slow. Okay. 5 and 6 and ready, go. 1.
Longer, they become more demanding, and it's obvious here that we are really taking the body into more dramatic means, basically, if I can say it this way. So in this one, in this combination, you will see something that we call the knee vibration, and although you will see a knee do a figure 8, know that it is done from the core. It's very visceral, so it really comes from the whole torso and involves the whole spine into a twist and twisting movement. You will see fall and recovery, so make sure you notice how the body is going to coil on itself to fall into the floor and uncoil to rise. You'll see also something that we call a pitch turn, so the torso here is set almost upside down into a circle on the standing leg. And another fall that we call split fall. Then you see the opposition of the body reaching up as the leg is reaching forward, and inevitably the body falls into the floor to recover. 5, 6, and ready to go.
now that you've seen the combinations once, you've seen a lot of the classwork, we wanted to give you another opportunity to just see these same combinations over again and make whatever observations you will. Oh, Jen.
Tempo. Uh-oh, did I touched the bottom, sorry. Here we go. 5 and 6 and ready, go. 1.
Doesn't that feel good when it happens, right? Take balance and you want to stay. Okay, so we'll give you another chance to see a Graham combination. The same. I would switch a couple of dancers. So the tempo was on 8, a little bit more visceral when you can. Everything. 5, 6, 7, 8. Thank you, dancer. So in the choreography of these two geniuses is where you are going to really see the big difference that we've been talking about here. And Graham used her technique often to tell a story, and we are going to see now an excerpt of Emballed Garden to illustrate the expressiveness of the body. See if you can notice what we were highlighted the whole time here tonight, such as the use of the connected torso. So here is an excerpt of Emballed Garden, a duet with Adam and Eve.
see an excerpt from a dance called August Pace. August Pace was first performed in 1989. It was a full company work, and it was comprised of 7 duets. Tonight you will see duet number 4, the 4th duet. Consistent with Cunningham's way of working, these dancers have learned and rehearsed this duet in silence. So we used music in class to help reinforce all of the rhythms and timings, but in every rehearsal, we would learn our dances in silence. So the music that they're hearing, we let them listen to it last night in rehearsal, but otherwise, on any other day, they would hear it just for the performance. So these duets were constructed, just to give you a little information about how Merce worked. First, he constructed a large group of phrases of varying lengths and qualities. And for each duet, Cunningham used chance operations to determine 2 sequences of phrases, 1 for each partner. So although you will see a duet, it can also be viewed as 2 simultaneous solos. This duet is not meant to tell a story or express an idea. It is simply 2 people dancing together. Cunningham once said that his work allows for an ambiguity in terms of meaning. This openness, he explained, leaves the spectator to creep in or out and make up his own mind.
So next we'll see an excerpt from Martha Graham Clytemnestra, the chorus, the Furies we call them. And Martha Graham was pretty much about telling story in opposition to leaving the audience the task to figure out a story for themselves. She pretty much nurtured individuality because of their own human emotions everybody has to bring in. But she also got inspiration from the Greek chorus theater. For example, Greek chorus were using a group of singers singing together to tell the story or to foretell the story. And Martha Graham uses a group of people to all dance together in unison to tell a story, not as an individual, but as 6 people together. So here will be very obvious all those torsions and contractions and release and spirals and unspirals that we have decorticated during the evening. You'll see them all there. There is a very quick backfall in it. Try to see if you can spot it. Here's the Fury.